Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
In your headlines tonight, the cavalry arrives. Sri Lanka begins discussions with IMF mission team in hopes of reaching staff-level agreement on bailout package. Appeals. President Ranil Wickremesinghe admits that reaching debt deal with China will be no simple task, urges China to change stance on restructuring. Temporary ban. 367 items deemed non-essential, temporarily banned from being imported to the island. Law enforcement. 7 suspects currently in police custody for setting fire to the president's residence, remanded until next month. All this and much more coming up tonight, this Wednesday, the 24th of August 2022.
Vim Deera milliliter CA smart pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. Joining you tonight with First at 9 news on AdaDerana English. I'm Indipari Amuatta. Sri Lankan authorities today began discussions with a delegation from the International Monetary Fund with the hope of reaching a staff-level agreement to an extended fund facility. The IMF team arrived in Colombo today to finalize what would be Sri Lanka's 17th IMF-supported extended fund facility. Sri Lanka hopes to receive $3 billion in total to help overcome the current economic challenges and restructure unsustainable debt.
Despite hesitation by Sri Lankan authorities initially to reach out to the International Monetary Fund, given the worsening economic situation in the country, the global lender turned out to be the only solution to the crisis that later transformed into a political crisis as well. After official approval was granted by the Cabinet of Ministers on the 15th of March to reach out to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout package, Sri Lankan authorities have held several discussions with the IMF, both in person and virtually. Today, a staff team of the International Monetary Fund arrived in Sri Lanka with hopes of reaching a staff-level agreement on the country's request for a bailout package. The final phase discussions between the visiting delegation of the IMF, led by Peter Brewer, Chief of the Debt Capital Markets Division of the Monetary and Capital Market Department, and Masahiro Nozaki, Senior Economist of IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, and Sri Lankan authorities began immediately after their arrival. Talks kicked off at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka this morning with the participation of the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, IMF Resident Representative Tubagas Feridhanu Sethuan, and Finance Secretary Mahinda Siriwardana. Meanwhile, the visiting IMF delegation called on President Ranil Wickremesinghe this evening to discuss the state of the Sri Lankan economy. The President's media division said that during the meeting with the President, the IMF staff decided to hold another round of discussions on Friday with the central bank officials to iron out technical issues pertaining to the EFF arrangement. Staff from the global lender will be in Colombo until the 31st of August. Sri Lanka first reached out to the IMF and held official discussions regarding the need for emergency funding, when then Finance Minister Ali Sabri attended the 2022 IMF and World Bank spring meetings from the 18th to the 22nd of April. The then Finance Minister Ali Sabri made the request to Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva. Following this, the IMF-led technical assistance team held virtual discussions with Sri Lankan authorities starting from the 9th of May on an economic program that could be supported by an IMF lending arrangement. The discussions concluded on the 24th of May. Then, on the 20th of June, an IMF delegation led by its Chief of the Debt Capital Markets Division, Monetary and Capital Market Department Peter Brewer, and Senior Economist of its Fiscal Affairs Department, Masahiro Nozaki, arrived in Sri Lanka for bailout talks with Sri Lankan authorities. Their first in-person talks on the facility under discussion. Upon conclusion on their 10-plus day visit, IMF's Peter Brewer and Masahiro Nozaki termed their work in Sri Lanka as constructive and productive, adding that the staff team and Sri Lankan authorities made significant progress on defining a macroeconomic and structural policy package. The IMF delegation said Sri Lankan authorities had made considerable progress in formulating the economic reform program and that the IMF is looking forward to continuing dialogue with Sri Lanka. However, Sri Lanka still has to negotiate with creditors after announcing a preemptive default on all outstanding debt totaling $51 billion in April 2022 as an emergency measure pending full discussions with the International Monetary Fund. But since Sri Lanka reached out to the IMF, it has continued to maintain that Sri Lanka's public debt was assessed unsustainable and that it requires sufficient assurance of restoring debt sustainability during the restructuring process. Nevertheless, the country awaits a prospective receipt of $3 billion in bailout arrangement from the International Monetary Fund, which is expected to bring in much relief to the country's forex shortage. Approval by the IMF Executive Board of the Extended Fund Facility Program would require adequate assurances by Sri Lanka's creditors that debt sustainability will be restored.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe has said that Sri Lanka is urging China to dramatically change its stance on debt relief. In an interview with Nikkei Asia, President Wickremesinghe has noted that reaching a deal with China will be no simple task.
Speaking to the Nikkei Asia publication, President Ranil Wickremesinghe said Sri Lanka has appealed to China of the need to restructure debt and the need for all the creditors to come together. But President Wickremesinghe has indicated that a complex path lies ahead in bringing about the change in heart in Beijing. He said China has adopted a different approach and the question remains what agreement other creditors can reach with China. During the 40-minute conversation with Nikkei Asia, President Wickremesinghe also commented on the geopolitical situation, saying it is heating up, but so far Sri Lanka has been able to keep tensions out and look at the country's own debt problem in a purely economic manner. However, the president said there will be an issue with how the debt is being treated and how the debt relief is to be treated, adding that there will be some geopolitical implications. Sri Lanka's list of creditors range from Western sovereign bond holders, who together account for $14 billion in debt, to bilateral players such as China, Japan and India. The country's outstanding foreign debt is at 51 billion rupees as at present.
And IMF staff-level talks with Sri Lankan authorities remain at a crucial point in Sri Lanka's negotiations to finalize a bailout package for the economy. Political party members are still divided and debating on their stance of supporting government reforms.
We want to completely denounce the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. When we were in government, we put forward proposals to Parliament to reform the PTA. We wanted to move forward. Post-war, taking the country to a new place. What has unfortunately happened to deal with the peaceful protesters, to detain them, the PTA is being used. And the police have given reasons why they want to use the PTA. This is not for the police to determine. This is for the politicians to determine that the PTA cannot be used. The normal law of the country must be applied. We don't condone with violence, even for a moment. We completely denounce those who burnt the houses of some members of parliament. We completely denounce that. We don't hold for that. But the normal law of the country must be applied and justice must prevail. The country can't normalize if we use the Prevention of Terrorism Act.
ඕන විපක්ෂයේ ඉඳන් අපි රජයේ වැඩපිළිවෙලකට අපි සහාය දෙනවා කියන එක නිකන් මේක අපි සිය දිවි නසා ගන්නවා වගේ වැඩක් නේ. කාට හරි කියන්න පුළුවන් මේ හරිම මෝඩයෝ මිනිස්සුනේ මේ කට්ටිය. නැත්තම් මොනවටද මේ ආණ්ඩුව කරන්න ඕනේ කියන ආර්ථික ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණවලට සහාය දෙන්න. ඇයි අපි එදා වේලේ දේශපාලනඥයෝ නම් මේක කරන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි අපේ රට කවදා හරි තැනකදී වෙනස් වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් ඒකයි අපි මේක කරන්නේ. ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල අරමුදල සතියක රැස්වීම සඳහා ලංකාවට පැමිණලා ඉන්නවා. මේ සතිය තාමත්ම වැදගත්. අපේ ආර්ථික ගොඩ ගැනීම සඳහා රජයේ මහ බැංකුව සහ ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල අරමුදල අතර සිද්ධ වෙන මේ සාකච්ඡා අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා ඒවා සාර්ථක වෙයි කියලා. මොකද අසාර්ථක වුණොත් එහෙම මේ රටේ සියලු ජනතාවට දුෂ්කර යථාර්ථයට දිගින් දිගටම මුහුණ දෙන්න සිද්ධ වෙයි.
මේ ආණ්ඩුවටත් මිටිස්සල තිබිච්ච ආණ්ඩුවලටත් විනාශ වෙන්න ප්‍රධාන කරුණු හතරක් බලපාලා තියෙනවා. පළවෙනි කාරණේ එක පුද්ගලයෙක් බලය අතට ගන්න. එක්කෝ තනි පවුලකට ගන්නව බලය. දෙවෙනි වැරද්ද මොකක්ද? බලය ගන්නව කිසිම සැලසුමක් නැහැ. සැලසුම හදපු මිනිස්සු එළියේ. සැලසුම වෙනුවෙන් රට වටේ ගිහිල්ලා ජන මනස අවදි කරපු ප්‍රතිපත්ති සම්පාදකයෝ එළියේ. ඒක පවුලක කීප දෙනෙක් තනතුරු වලට එනවා. මේක නෙමෙයි ඉතිහාසෙනේ. හතරවෙනි කාරණේ මම කරුණු හතරක්. හොරකම, වංචාව.
And we'll take a short break here at AdaDerana 24 English News.
Big 3.
Welcome back. 7 of the suspects arrested over the incident during which President Ranil Wickremesinghe's residence was torched were ordered to be further remanded until the 7th of September. President Ranil Wickremesinghe's private residence was torched by a group of people on the 9th of July when mass protests stormed Colombo.
4 suspects including Duminda Nagamua of the Frontline Socialist Party, Father Jeevantha Peris, Joseph Stalin and Nalin Tilak Gunawardana, General Secretary of the Ceylon Teachers Union, who were presented to the Fort Magistrates Court today for forcibly entering the President's house in Fort on the 9th of July, have been released on bail of 500,000 rupees each. Further, Vasantha Samarasinghe, a member of the political committee of the JVP, Vasantha Mudlige, the convener of the inter-university student body, who is in custody, and Koswatta Mahanamathera were named as suspects of the case. In the meantime, Fort Magistrate Tilna Gamage today ordered that the 7 suspects who were remanded in custody in connection with the burning of the private house of President Ranil Wickremesinghe to be further remanded until the 7th of September. Further, the Fort Magistrate today ordered that the mobile phones of Sanat Nishantha and Milan Jayatilaka and Dan Priyasad, Nalaka Vijay Singh, who were named as suspects in the case of attacking the protesters at the Golface Green on the 9th of May, to be handed over to the Criminal Investigation Department. At the time the case was called, President's attorney Upul Jayasuriya said that the suspect in the case, Sanat Nishantha, a member of the parliament, had issued a statement in a way that insulted the lawyers and the court. The President's counsel showed a video of the insults made by the suspect before the court and asked the magistrate to take the relevant legal measures. In the meantime, the National Centre for Struggle was opened today in Colombo to bring together the people who were involved in the struggle in the Golface Green and other places for the future goals. Police officers were seen waiting around the location of the centre this morning.
Sri Lanka suspended a total of 367 non-essential items temporarily imported into the country. President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his capacity as Finance Minister, issued a government notice on Monday, including a list of items that are relevant to those engaged in the construction field and for consumers for suspension from import.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his capacity as Finance Minister, issued the government notice on Monday restricting the import of 367 non-essential items to the country effective from yesterday. However, any goods shipped with the date of bill of lading or airway bill on or before the 23rd of August and arrived at any sea or airports in Sri Lanka on or before the 14th of September will be allowed for customs clearance. The list of restricted imported items includes consumer and industrial products. Some items prohibited through the list are drinking water, canned milk, yogurt, chocolate, liquid coconut milk, and alcohol made from coconut. The import of women's and men's ready-made clothes, underwear, nightwear, children's clothes, swimwear, ties, winter coats, jackets, leather footwear, hats, safety hats, umbrellas, rubber gloves, leather-related products are also temporarily suspended. The import of perfumes, cosmetics and related items, shampoos, sanitary materials related to toilets have also been suspended. The list also includes shaving and hairstyling accessories, sunglasses, watches, musical instruments, loudspeakers, telephone accessories, electrical accessories, and light bulbs used for decoration. Among the list of items suspended for importation are also toys with wheels, including dolls, tricycles, and festive decorations are among the prohibited items. The import of tiles, bricks, ceramics and batteries are also temporarily suspended. Ceramic pipes, rain gutters, kitchen utilities, tableware, wrenches, pumps and bakery electric ovens are also prohibited. In addition, construction tools, machinery used in agriculture, livestock production, printing industry, clothing and textile manufacturing industry, and water pipe fittings are also among the suspended material. However, it is also stated in the announcement that goods imported for re-export purposes will be allowed to be imported, subjected to the approval of the Import and Export Controller.
Now, another 30,000 metric tons of super diesel brought to the island started unloading this morning. Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Vijayasekara stated that another shipment carrying a cargo of crude oil also reached Sri Lanka yesterday. He said that a batch of auto diesel is scheduled to arrive in Sri Lanka tomorrow and the day after. The minister's tweet today further stated that a ship carrying a stock of 92-octane petrol is also scheduled to arrive in the country between the 27th and 29th. Welcome back to the news. The Colombo stock market closed in negative territory for a second straight session today as some investors sought to profit-taking while others adopted a wait-and-see approach ahead of the interim budget scheduled for next week. Now, however, following the import restriction announcement, local manufacturing companies, including the aluminium industry, witnessed renewed investor activity. The main index skid steeply as soon as market opened on the back of heavy profit-taking, but managed to recoup part of the losses towards the end of the session. Market closed at 9,011, losing 60 points. Turnover was down 2.5 billion rupees, while the food, beverage and tobacco sector, along with the energy sector, jointly contributed 50% to the total turnover. Now, the Russian currency eased today but still traded near 60 against the US dollar as it retained some support from month-end tax payments that prompt export-focused firms to step up conversion to foreign currency while stock indexes inched lower. Year to date, the ruble has become the world's best performing currency as a result of capital controls that Russia imposed after beginning what is called a special military operation in Ukraine on the 24th of February. Ruble volatility has subsided after wild swings that saw it hit a record low of 121.53 to the US dollar on the Moscow exchange in March, and the rally to a 7-year peak of 50.01 in June. Russia's economy has avoided the meltdown many predicted after Moscow forces were sent into Ukraine 6 months ago, with higher prices for its oil exports cushioning the impact on Western sanctions. But hardships are emerging for some Russians. France can not hold on to billion euro energy price caps to help households cope with soaring inflation, foreign government spokesperson Olivier Véran told journalists today. Gas prices in France are currently frozen and the government has also put in place a cap for power price hikes, but both measures are set to expire this winter. Meanwhile, the French government will present a draft law in September to speed up energy infrastructure projects and hamper out a short-term plan to secure energy supplies for the coming winter. Still in international business news, Wall Street's main indices were subsided in early trading today as recent economic data added to worries of a slowdown ahead of the US Federal Reserve's conference this week. The US indexes posted losses in the past 3 sessions after a summer rally was halted by growing concerns of a hawkish stance by the Fed, an energy crisis in Europe, and signs of economic slowdown in China.
Data showed private sector business activity in the United States contracted for a second straight month in August to its weakest in 27 months, with particular softness in the services sector as demand weakened. Investor focus will be on US Federal Reserve's conference tomorrow for clues on whether the central bank can achieve a soft landing. Traders are split between expecting a 50 basis point hike and a 75 basis point hike by the central bank. Markets had bounced back from bear markets, low on better than expected results from corporate America, and data suggesting that inflation may have peaked, but fears on aggressive Fed snapped the summer rally last week. Meanwhile, surveys have showed the global economy is increasingly at risk of sliding into recession as consumers face with generation high inflation, rein in spending, while the central bank are tightening policies aggressively.
And that's all the news for tonight. Thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.